to zrobione razem z Fundacją Denarera, tak? Ta konferencja? Okej, Gdzie jest ten pan, który zastępuje panią Angelikę? Gdzie jest ten pan, który zastępuje Angelikę? Ona, ale on? Kto to jest Piotr? Czego? Kasu? To jest kas?
Piotr będzie reprezentował.
No to chodź. To chodź. Później zapraszamy pana, jeszcze pana, i uciekamy. Chodź, chodź.
Proszę Państwa, proszę Państwa, utrzymają się doczynne o zawieszenie swoich prezentacji.
Marta, ty przyjdziesz do tego? Czyli pan zastępuje Angelikę? Tak, tutaj. Ja mam Piotr Womela.
Tak, Piotr Womela. Tak jest.
I would like to remind you about the questionnaire evaluating our seminar. So we will correct, we could fulfill the questionnaire in the end of the day or when you will leave. So this is our first request because we need this evaluation for project proposals to the European Commission. And the second announcement is about the language. So as it was stipulated in the invitation sent by the Director and the website of the association, the event is run in English with no translation into Polish.
Dzień dobry Państwu. Witam serdecznie. Welcome. Herzlich willkommen. Professor Latoszek will join our conference soon as well. I don't know, is Angelika not coming? Pani Angelika Klein is not coming, so yes, we start just now. Yeah, no tak Ewa kazała. It is the order of Eva. My name is Andrzej Stępniak. I am representing Gdańsk University, but as well Polish European Community Studies Association. And Pan Piotr Womela is representing Ms. Angelika Klein. She couldn't come. As François Mitterrand and many big European names, big people, Jacques Delors, always stressed European Union or European integration is the never-ending construction. And I remember also the also very important person in the European community, Emile Noël, responsible for the budget and finance. He said always, also Noi Simura, we are building, we are just providing the construction. And until now we have the same situation. Europe is very huge but very important project. I don't need to explain why now it's so important to discuss about these problems. We have two parts of our conference. The first one is political and policy challenges in Europe, and second one is is about socio-economic challenges. And I think I don't need to stress why we, as Polish citizens, but I am feeling as European as well, why it's so important just now in Warsaw, in Poland, to discuss the current problem and the future problem, because as we know, Polish way is a little bit different like a few years ago. And in this situation, our statement, our discussion is very important. Marta, please, you take the... So, welcome, herzlich willkommen. Dzień dobry, witam serdecznie.
Thank you very much, dear professor. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's our pleasure, of the members and the board of the Polish European Community Studies Association, to welcome you today during the PECSA Roundtable Debate 2017. The title of the event is The Role of European Values in Times of the Political and Socio-Economic Challenges in Europe. And just to add some words to the introductory speech of Professor Stępniak, our event is the part of the three-year project that is co-financed by the European Commission. This project is a part of Jean Monnet program, and its aim is to support the statutory activities of our association from 2016 to 2019. And we assumed in the project that each year, during these 3 years, we will invite our members, and not only them, but also everyone interested in European issues, to take part as an active or as a passive participant in the event. The event is organized as the Roundtable Debate, and today, as it was mentioned by Professor, we prepared for you two roundtable sessions. They will be dedicated to different aspects of European values. We will start with political and policy challenges in Europe, shared values, and the second session will be about socio-economic challenges and European values. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Piotr Womela. He is today the representative of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung in Poland. Unfortunately, the head of the office of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung in Poland, Dr. Angelika Klein, she cannot be here with us. That is why Piotr is representing the partner institution, and now he will also briefly introduce you to the topic to our today's discussion. So, Piotr, please, a few words.
Is it possible to...
Here or there, it's up to you. All right. So please, a few words from your perspective.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I would like to welcome you at the Roundtable Debate, which is co-organized by the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, and I'm very glad that our foundation is participating in this important event. As it was already said, unfortunately, Ms. Angelika Klein, the director of the Polish office of our foundation, could not come and join our debate today, but she asked me to represent the foundation. The Konrad Adenauer Foundation is a German institution which provides political counseling. Ideologically, we stand for Christian democratic values. We operate in Poland since 1989, and from the very beginning, we have supported the democratic transition of post-communist countries in Europe and, of course, here in Poland. Now, the foundation carries out more than 100 projects a year, here in Poland, of course. Well, this, however, would not be possible without the foundation's reliable partners. The Polish European Community Studies Association is one of our partners, and the cooperation with the association is highly essential. The topic of today's conference is a very interesting one and in line with our current priorities. Our activities are focused on strengthening the European integration and on conducting analysis concerning complex processes taking place within the European Union. The key question of today's conference is how values can provide solutions to the various crises that disintegrate Europe. I'm very glad that we managed to gather at this conference, this roundtable debate, such a prominent group of experts. At this point, I would like to express my gratitude to the speakers for being here today. I would also like to thank the Warsaw School of Economics for their hospitality and, of course, the Polish European Community Studies Association for organizing our meeting. Last but not least, I would like to thank Professor Latoszek, who is not with us, but she will come later, and, of course, Marta Pachocka for the excellent cooperation and substantive support. I wish you fruitful discussions. Thank you very much.
Piotr, thank you very much for these nice words about our cooperation, and also about some information about the office of Konrad Adenauer in Poland. Now I would like also say thank you very much to other organizers and partners of the event. As you can see here, the list is quite long, but it also means that there are many institutions, departments of the universities or faculties of the universities, also think tanks and non-governmental organizations that are strongly involved in the projects going on and that are run by PECSA. So let me only briefly mention some of them. So I would like thank you very much to Center for Europe of the University of Warsaw, also to Jacob of Paradise University in Gorzów Wielkopolski. There's also among us the representative Professor Gaga Gabricidze from New Vision University in Tbilisi, and at the same time the president of European Community Studies Association in Georgia, so the sister organization from Eastern Partnership country. Also many thanks to Poznań University of Economics, University of Economics in Katowice, University of Gdańsk, strongly represented today by Professor Stępniak and his team, and obviously Jean Monnet Center of Excellence at Warsaw School of Economics, and the two departments of Collegium of Socioeconomics, Jean Monnet Chair of the EU run by Professor Ewa Latoszek, at the same time president of our association, and Department of Political Studies I have the pleasure to represent today. And DERE, the American College of Greece in Athens. Today we have a guest as an active participant from this institution, Dr. Anna Vizvizi, and Institute of East Central Europe, also represented by Dr. Anna Vizvizi. So once again, thank you very much for being here and for your involvement in promotion and information activities of the event. And now I would like to invite you to participate in the first session, and I would like to invite here our moderator and the speakers of the first session.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Aleksandra Borowicz. I will be the moderator of the first session. I would like to ask my panelists to join me at the table: Professor Bogdan Guralczyk, Professor Zybała, Professor Gaga Gabricidze, Dr. Aleksandra Szczerba-Zawada, and Dr. Marta Pachocka. Okay, I think that we will start slowly. First of all, I would like to thank you, the organizers, that they thought of me as a moderator in this conference. It is a great privilege to be here, a part of this project, and have the opportunity to share knowledge and reflection with such distinguished experts. First of all, I would like to introduce my great experts. Professor Bogdan Guralczyk, Director of the Center for Europe at the University of Warsaw. Professor Andrzej Zybała, Warsaw School of Economics. Professor Gaga Gabrychidze, New Vision University in Tbilisi. Dr. Aleksandra Szczerba-Zawada and Dr. Marta Pachocka. I will try to show you my slides. As a short warming up, I would like to have a few remarks opening our session. Somehow when I got the information about the titles of my experts' presentations, it was very in line what I have prepared. The discussion on the future of development of European Union is a result of few determinants, which I want to discuss today. And these determinants, in my opinion, mainly affected the perception of European integration process. First of all, is the economic crisis which started in 2008, which showed how deep problems are in the Eurozone with the governance of policy, not only in economic terms, but also in social terms. The second issue is rising skepticism in Europe, what shows that in this context it is worth notifying that crucial is the leading role of Germany in this process, and this is the part of great discussion in different member states. However, at the same time, I think as a very positive issue will be the result of presidential election in France. The third issue is connected with migration and refugee crisis, about which will talk Dr. Pachocka. It showed great importance and lack of understanding of the solidarity clause in European Union, and it also showed in European Union what problems countries are facing with the crisis management. Fourth determinant, showing lack of effectiveness in policy implementation, and very weak point was the foreign policy in the context of Ukrainian context. And finally, the Brexit, the case which shows that after 60 years after signing the Treaty of Rome, European Union for the first time faces the problem of disintegration, because leaving European Union by United Kingdom, it's an obvious thing that we are facing for the first time, the disintegration. However, the history showed us also that European Union, after each crisis, became much more stronger, and hopefully it will be some kind of renewal for European Union after very difficult negotiations with the United Kingdom. I would like to underline four aspects for European Union renewal. This is also somehow connected with values which are the fundamentals for European Union and European process of integration. This is the solidarity and understanding of solidarity and European values, which are one of the main subjects that we will be discussing today. In my opinion, for solidarity clause, for understanding the solidarity and discussion on European values, there is a lot of space now, especially now in European Union, and especially at the level of national societies in member states. The third issue is connected with the implementation of effective policy. And as a result, if we combine these three aspects, we will go into details that we can create consistent and coherent position of member states in European Union, what will lead us to deeper, better integration and very strong European Union on the global scene. What will be the answer for changing global settings and regional settings? For now, I would like to leave the floor and give the first and ask first expert, Professor Bogdan Guralczyk from University of Warsaw.
May I be seated?
Of course.
Thank you, Mrs. Chairman. I understand we have short interventions for some, as we agreed, 7-8 minutes. So my intervention will be as short as possible. I would like to talk on 3 new division lines which are emerging on the European landscape, and all of them are strictly combined with the issue which was mentioned in the introductory remarks, which means the problem of solidarity or European solidarity as a value. The first division line, according to my mind, is just a perspective or is emerging on the horizon, and it is potentially dangerous, and I would describe it as a return to the East-West division, which is very unfortunate to mention something like that here in Warsaw, because all of us do remember, at least the people of my generation, this East-West division and the Iron Curtain. I am not saying that the new Iron Curtain is emerging, but I would be very cautious observing situation in some countries of our region, especially the Visegrad Group, and to those who are familiar with me, they know that I am Polish, but with very strong links to Hungary, and this perspective of mine is Polish-Hungarian, and in this respect, we lost our solidarity vis-à-vis the problem of migrants. And here we have more and more voices. Just yesterday we had a high representative from the European Commission in our center, and he shared the views that many experts and especially politicians in the western part of our continent are sharing the view that maybe the Visegrad countries and some other candidates from our region were received and joined the integration too early. So if we want to escape this, we should honestly exchange our views and to discuss the issue, because to my mind, we have already something written on the wall, especially vis-à-vis, to my mind, possibility, which is actually good for the European integration, of return to the hard core of integration, which is the axis of Paris and Berlin. After the election of Emmanuel Macron, I understand this is possible, and sooner or later, rather sooner, immediately after the German elections, this particular issue which I'm right now specifying could emerge as something very important for our governing circles and also for the opposition, because there will be a strong push inside the European Union, to my mind, for further integration, and we in the Visegrad Group, we are moving in opposite direction, and especially the question of migrants is absolutely crucial here. The second division line I would like to show and share my view about is already current division line and very serious. This has something to do, of course, with solidarity and mostly with the issue of Brexit and also Mediterranean countries. Like it or not, I'm not the only individual or not the only expert who is sharing this view. We have another division line very strictly linked to the problem of euro, which is the problem, structural problem to my mind. Structural means for years to come or decades, and this is South-North division. This is more or less the question of Mediterranean. It's not only the Brexit. To my mind, it is not only Greece or Cyprus. This is also, ladies and gentlemen, the problem of Italy. And as you know, we have this fateful year of elections, this 2017. We had them in Netherlands. We still have them, and it is not decided. I hope Emmanuel Macron will prevail also in parliamentary elections, but we are waiting for that. Later on, German elections, and like it or not, we have also on the horizon Italian elections. And in this respect, we need to be careful, especially with the issue which is declared by many experts like Joseph Stiglitz, like Branko Milanovic, very famous ones, Thomas Piketty. But first of all, someone who is mentioned frequently recently, George Soros, who is very well known in this part of Europe and this region, that Germany has emerged as the hegemonic power in Europe, and we have a problem with this. We have a problem with this, and we need to discuss this issue once again. And supposedly, if I'm expecting the renovation of this Berlin-Paris axis, this issue will re-emerge as well. And finally, the third division line is the most important. About these two we can speculate, we can discuss, we can debate, we will have no agreement definitely, but the third one is visible, current, crucial, and multifarious in practically all member states, including Germany. And we have several phases, not phases, but phases, like phase of this problem. Some people say clash between national and supranational forces, or some people say Eurosceptic versus Euro enthusiast. Some people say global, anti-global. But to my mind, this is more serious. This is once again about open and closed societies. As I mentioned, I am someone who is dealing with Hungary. I was 3 times recently in Hungary. I just came 2 days or 3 days ago from Hungary. And the people are demonstrating there for the independence of universities. It's not only George Soros Central European University, it's 27 all together, and the new legal framework for them, which not allows them to be free. And this is the real issue. So we have a situation like that within the European Union. For someone who is more interested in our flagship of our center, which is a yearbook we publish in a previous edition, I published on Hungarian language sources how Mr. Orban managed to undermine checks and balances system, undermined the axiology of the Copenhagen criteria, and created liberal versus illiberal clash. That's what we have on the agenda. And like it or not, you had UKIP in Great Britain, you have Marine Le Pen, you have Geert Wilders, you have even Timo Soini, which is a member and until recently foreign minister of Finland, and you have Polish and Hungarian case, highly and hotly debated. You have them in all Mediterranean countries. So this is the issue to be discussed in the conferences like ours, because to my mind we are talking about Eurozone, Euro crisis, economic crisis. I am sharing the view that instead of economy stupid, we should shout right now, security stupid. But first of all, we should debate more and more, and I am happy that the title of this conference is on the subject, which is the problem with our system of values. This is the real issue we should touch, we should debate, and we should discuss, because we have so many problems on the horizon, and I understand I lost already my 7 or 8 minutes, so I will finish as for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like just make a short information that we will ask the audience about the questions after all the presentations. Next speech will be given by Professor Andrzej Zybała from Warsaw School of Economics. If the professor has any slides, I can.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear organizers, thank you very much for inviting me to speak with so many distinguished speakers. It's a great opportunity to me to share with all of you my thoughts on so important dimension, public policy and European values. To be honest, it's quite unusual for someone like me to speak about public policy and European values, as I would like to show you later on that it's quite unusual to share between policies and the European values. But now let me start from the fundamental remark that across Europe we have many problems, policy problems. I begin from that statement because generally public policy is about public problems, common problems, collective problems. And this is something we have a lot, and probably we would have to organize a separate meeting, event or conference to talk about European problems. But the public policy, it's mainly to deal with them, categorizing them, creating some tools to resolve them. And as you can see, we can start from very basic problems like potholes, like the condition of roads, through traffic jams issues, until such complex problems like asylum seekers issues. These are all questions which are very important from the point of view of the public policy. At the same time, public policy is much about solutions, not only about problems, but about solutions as well. It's not that we are such an effective discipline or such an effective practice. Sometimes it's very hard to work out something which can be effective. As you can see, this is a good example that not always we are good enough at what we are supposed to do. And let me show you a few definitions about public policy. Mainly, it's, as you can see, this is quite technocratic area of human knowledge, technocratic or technical knowledge. This is about governmental activity or civic activity aimed at resolving public problems. As you can see, for example, definition by Peters and definition by these scientists and another definition, and what we can see is that there is no mention about values. And we can ask to what extent there is a kind of link between policies and values. But there are very few scientists who try to create some links between them, saying that policies are based very much on some values, understanding as a preferences, as something which we value, something which we appreciate very much, what we prefer in our action, and so on. There are some very nice formulations of these problems, of this area of problems, I mean values and public policy. Some scientists are saying about normative aspects of policy making, and even Harold Laswell, who is regarded as a founding father of the public policy as a scientific discipline, as a practice at the same time. And he said among his characteristic of the public policy, he said that there is a normative dimension in policy making. Why? Because what we do publicly, it's mainly based on our preferences. What we do when we create, when we formulate, when we program policies, we do it on the basis of our preferences. For example, we formulate policies to support homeless people because our values tell us that it's very bad when people are homeless. Our values tell us that it's something we should change, reorient, shift, and that's why this normative aspect is so important. Other people, other scientists formulate the issue as a value-laden realities of public policy, and the same questions, they reflect our priorities, they reflect values of policymakers. But to be honest, it's not such a frequent occurrence within the discipline of the public policy, as I told you before. And some analysts or scientists say that there is something like normative burden. That means it's not so nice to deal with values in policy making. It's not so nice, it's not so easy. Especially, my guess is that policy scientists or policy analysts start talking about values when they are angry, when they are real, when they have real difficulties with understanding complexities of some policies, when they think that things are in chaos, in a messy, and they think it's a very difficult situation. Sometimes in some policies there are too many conflicting values, and that's why it's hard to produce compromises, it's hard to produce ideas how to resolve policy problems. Well, when it comes to the European Union, what is specific about policies in the context of the European Union? I think, first of all, this is a policy making beyond the state. Normally, we are used to the situation when policies concern national arena, national things. In the case of the European Union, we produce we produce solutions, ideas, how to deal with problem across Europe. That's another level of how things can be complicated. And in my view, when we want to understand the framework of values in the European Union or across Europe, I think two things are very important. One, this is mainly about value systems which we can see across Europe. And one of the fundamental trend, which is as a basis for values across Europe, is the age of enlightenment. Age of enlightenment. All of us knows what it is and probably how important it is for the values we can see across Europe right now. From my perspective, this period of time is so important because it produced a specific approach which creates a tendency to rely on reason, on objectified reasoning, to find reasonable solutions across policies. When we see problems, we resolve to reasonable research, reasonable inquiries. But problem is fundamental because, as we can see, many values are conflicting. It's not easy to compromise between values, for example, like supporting the poor and creating opportunities for the rich. This is conflicting in practice in many policies. For example, trying to resolve the current problems, present problems, and trying to create opportunities for the future generations. This is very visible in the environmental policy. It's not easy to compromise interest of natural system and interest of humans. It's not easy to compromise between efficiency and equity, liberty and equality, fairness and own contributions. These are conflicting values. And I wonder to what extent we can say about the European reaction to this collection of values. And my guess is that we can say about two things. How to deal with these conflicting values. One question, one area is what I mentioned before, a rational tradition. A rational tradition coming from the age of enlightenment. And that traditions creates tendencies to rely in policy formulation on rational analysis. As an example, we can mention impact assessment procedures. This is very widespread across European institutions. But of course, on the national level, we have this kind of procedures, legal procedures. But this is very visible when we try to analyze how the European institutions try to deal with policy problems. What we can see as a part of the rational tradition, policy evaluation. What else? Epistemic communities. In many policies we can see how they are widespread. In every policy we can see policy networks. That means people try to get together to resolve problems together. What else? For example, it's a quite recent development, evidence-based policy. This is the same thing, the same roots. I mean rational tradition. Rational tradition. And what else? And a second strand of my thinking about the European values and the way the European institutions try to compromise, create compromises or consensus. This is civic engagement. Civic engagement, this is quite obvious. We can see it everywhere. And example of this element of the European values. We can see, for example, policy dialogue in many policies, many arenas of of dialogue. The example is the European Economic and Social Committee, with representatives of many policy actors from many social circles, and they try to work together to produce rational solutions. And what else? Policy networks, as I said before, in most policies, cooperation, widespread cooperation, lots of deliberation and consensus-seeking approach. Well, when we look at the literature on the policy making, we can see many attempts of summarizing the typical European approach. And what is, for example, this is one of the book on public policy in the European Union, and we can see that authors put emphasis on questions like mutual recognition of policy actors, collaboration as a best means of achieving policy gains, and desire to achieve negotiation and create a stable policy environments in many policies. Of course, when we look at the national levels, on France, Germany, we can see different, what we can call policy styles. And I would say that European policy style is a sum of styles coming from many or main or leading European countries. As this is axis, we have two axes. This is and they reflect two tendencies. One of is consensual approach to policy making, and in opposite is imposing way of policy making. That means no policy dialogue. That means attempt not to negotiate, but to impose its own ideas on other policy actors. And another axis is anticipatory approach to policy making, and reactive. And as you can see, within Europe, there are different traditions or different approaches, different styles of policy making. And I think that European style of policy making, or the policy style we can see when it comes to European institutions, this is something that comes from these traditions, and but there is something more, I think, because I think within the European institutions there is a bigger emphasis on negotiations. There are bigger emphasis on negotiations, on dialogue. There are lots of procedures which create opportunities to deliberate, to negotiate, to create a common denominator among those who have some kind of interests, not only the biggest business interest, but including interest of the most deprived or underprivileged people. Thank you very much for your attention, because my time is running out and I have no chance to continue maybe later on. Thank you.
Now I would like to ask Professor Gaga Gabrihidze from New Vision University in Tbilisi.
Thank you. I would like to share with you a view from a non-member state of the European Union regarding this issue of values And I would like to discuss this issue in the context of the choice which Georgia has to make, and this is the choice between the European Union and the Russian-led Eurasian Economic Union, and whether this choice is a value-related choice, or are there any other reasons why Georgia is choosing the European integration into European Union. When we are talking about Georgia's attitude towards the Eurasian Economic Union, consideration should be given to the fact that Russia is perceived in Georgia as occupant, as a country that occupies several parts of the territory of Georgia. And in fact, the relations between Georgia and Russia are at the lowest level. And consequently, it's hard to promote the idea of renouncing the EU in favor of closer economic ties with Russia. But still, there are definitely issues which might be of interest to discuss, and I will start with economic attractiveness. And when we speak of attractiveness, the Eurasian Economic Union should be obviously compared with benefits which Georgia might gain from the association agreement concluded with the European Union. According to a document analyzing public expectations and fears related to the conclusion of the association agreement, the association agreement is expected to bring many tangible economic benefits to Georgia. Over time, the association agreement will lead to a significant improvement in Georgians' quality of life, notably through the strengthening of democracy and rule of law, through increased political, institutional, and economic stability, and through a stronger, more prosperous economy. Such studies have not yet been done with regard to Eurasian Economic Union. However, we can refer to actual figures. Between January and September 2016, Georgia's external trade turnover with EU countries reached $2.5 billion. Latest figures from the National Statistics Office of Georgia showed external trade turnover between Georgia and EU countries grew 10% year on year. And exports to these countries were worth 389 million, while imports were valued at 2.1 billion. EU countries made up a 28% share of Georgia's total external trade turnover. Meanwhile, in the same 9 months, Georgia weakened its trade ties with the Commonwealth of Independent States and other countries. During this reporting period, Georgia's external trade turnover with Commonwealth of Independent States, CIS countries, reached 1.8 billion, an 8% reduction. And if we take only figures related to the trade with the members of Eurasian Economic Union, and these are Russia, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Armenia, in the same period of time, turnover was 289 million, and in contrast with the European Union, 388 million. So, next, please. Yeah. Perception. How Georgians perceive the role of the European Union. Results of a March 2016 survey carried out by a National Democratic Institute shows that when choosing between the European Union and the Eurasian Economic Union, support for the European Union has increased from 58% in November to 61% in March, and 20%, down from 24% in November, chose the Eurasian Economic Union. Survey from June 2016 shows that 72% of respondents support government's stated goal to join the European Union. And following all these developments in Georgia, Russia pulled its soft power levers in Georgia, and there are news outlets such as Kremlin-funded Sputnik radio and the internet portal and other internet portals, and also Eurasianist civil movements pushing the Russian message of Europe as a pit of sin and decadence. And the wave of propaganda disproportionately affects ethnic minorities, but also makes a considerable number of ethnic Georgians waver. Almost half of respondents agree with the statements that the European Union threatens Georgian traditions, whatever they can be, including 19% who fully agree with this statement and 26% who agree more than disagree with it. Next slide, please. Next. Yeah. Who are proponents and opponents in Georgia of the idea of integration into the European Union? These are the final results of 2016 parliamentary elections. And you can see on the slide with GD, this is the ruling party now, Georgian Dream, which has 115 seats in the parliament. You and Me United National Movement, the former ruling party. Here on the slide we see 27 seats, but the party dissolved in January 2017, and most of the members of the parliament have left this party and are now in another party, European Georgia. But what I want to show is that only Alliance of Patriots, the party which has 6 seats in the Georgian parliament, is a pro-Russian party. All other parties are pro-European, including the ruling party of Georgia. Next slide. And I'm going to close my presentation with some slides which are based on rankings, on indexes of Transparency International and We see here, this is the slide showing corruption, situation on corruption in different countries. And if you can see, Georgia is the, so the colors, the darker colors indicate more difficult situation with regard to corruption. And you see Georgia is an island in the region. And in the ranking, Georgia has the place number 44. And if you compare the position of Georgia in this ranking, you can see that 8 or 9 members of the European Union are below Georgia. And the next slide, please. And this is freedom of press index, which is done by Freedom House. And here also we see this island in the region. Once again, with regard to values, the question arises why Georgia should choose a more corrupt Eurasian Economic Union when it has already now EU standard corruption level. So this issue with values, this choice between the Eurasian Economic Union and the European Union is a choice which is based partly on values, but also partly on economic attractiveness. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you very much. Now our next speaker will be Dr. Aleksandra Szczerba-Zawada, and I would like to invite her here to the floor.
Dear Alexandra, dear organizers, I would like to thank you for allowing me to be a part of this great event, during which I would like to share with you my opinion on the European Union as the community of values, with special attention paid to the equality principle. I will start with outlining the EU as the community of values, and then I will move to 3 aspects of equality in the EU law. The first one is the equality of the member states, then the equality of the EU citizens, and finally the prohibition of unequal treatment based on protected characteristics. As we all know, the European Union and its predecessors were not designed as the communities of values in a political sense. They were created as platforms for economic cooperation, and this is confirmed by the provisions of the Paris Treaty and the Rome Treaties. Nevertheless, in the course of the integration process, the European Union has evolved into the community of values. The very important step forward was the Treaty of Maastricht that introduced the legal basis for a new phase, new stage of cooperation of the European states, political cooperation. And the process of the evolution of the European Union, or the character of the European Union, was finished, at least so far, with the Lisbon Treaty, that for the first time referred to the axiological foundation of the European Union. In Article 2 of the TEU, there are some values on which the European Union is based mentioned. What's very important, these values are common also to the member states, and also referred for the first time to the promotion of these values both inside and outside of the EU as one of the aims of the European Union and its member states. One of these values is equality. Although it plays a very important role in the European Union, also in a legal perspective, this is an equivocal concept. the equality is both the fundamental human right to be treated equally, and the general principle of EU law, so the primary source of the European Union law. The idea that stands behind the concept of equality is the requirement that comparable situations must not be treated differently, and different situations must not be treated in the same way, unless such treatment is objectively justified. What means that under circumstances, there is possibility to justify the exceptions to the requirement of equality, to the equality principle. When it comes to the concrete examples of these three perspectives that we can apply to analyze the equality in the EU law, I would like to draw attention to the equality of the member states of the European Union. The member states as the sovereign entities are equal under international law, and this equality resulting from sovereignty is also respected by the European Union. It is confirmed by Article 4.2 TEU, but it's also conferred by many other treaty provisions introducing concrete legal institutions. Amongst them, there is the requirement of the consent of all member states in the form of ratification procedures in order to make amendments to the treaties, or the consensus, that is the basic, the primary decision-making procedure in the European Council. Okay. When it comes to the second aspect of equality that I would like to draw attention to, equality of the EU citizens, we have to keep in mind that the EU citizenship should be the main legal status of the individuals in the European Union, and the equality of the EU citizens must be observed by all the EU institutions during all of their activities. It means in practice that when these EU citizens find themselves in a similar situation, they should be treated in the same way, irrespective of their nationality. It implies the prohibition of discrimination based on nationality, as enshrined in Article 18 TFEU. And the final aspect of equality principle in the European Union law I would like to draw attention to is the prohibition of unequal treatment, or in other words, prohibition of discrimination based on protected characteristics. Characteristics protected under EU anti-discriminatory law. This branch of law, of EU law, has evolved from the prohibition of wage discrimination between men and women, enshrined in Article 119 EEC Treaty, and nowadays cover 6 protected grounds in 4 areas. As you can see, the characteristic that is protected most widely against discrimination or unequal treatment is race. There is then the second place is at the second place is sex, and the other 4 characteristics are protected only in one field: employment and vocational training. Okay. To sum up. It's obvious that the European values can be used and indeed are used to legitimize the integration process. It's obvious not only in the perspective of Article 2 of the TEU, but also it's confirmed by Article 7 of the Treaty on the European Union, that introduces both the preventive and sanctioning mechanism in case of a risk of serious breach or a serious and persistent breach for European Union values, including equality. Thank you very much for your attention. Should you have any questions, I will be happy to answer to them.
Okay, Okay, and now I will give the floor to Dr. Marta Pochocka with her speech on solidarity as a missing value in times of the migrant and refugee crisis in the EU. And I will ask Dr. Pochocka to be in time.
Yes, I do my best. So once again, I'm happy to be here, and that I have this opportunity to give you a short speech about one of the key values, in my opinion, among the European and, in general, human values. So it's about the solidarity. But it's about the solidarity in a very specific case. So as we've heard before, there are different approaches to analyze, to talk about values. And my presentation, in fact, a very short presentation, is about practical approach and about practical case study, how such specific value as solidarity does not work and is not implemented. So it's not a very nice story. And the story is about the solidarity among EU member states. And the case study is about the migrant and refugee crisis in the EU, because this is my main research field in recent years. So let me briefly introduce you to the topic, to the reference point about the migration and refugee crisis. As far as we know, migration is not something new in the history of our continent. Also, it's not a new phenomenon in the 20th century. But there is something new that happened in the early 21st century, and this is about the scale and pace of the migratory movements that were observed from Africa and from Middle East to Europe, and specifically to some of the EU member states. And here I keep in mind two of them, frontline states in the Mediterranean region, so Italy and Greece. So this is something new from our short time perspective, but not from history perspective. And with this increasing migratory movements observed at least since 2014 in the Mediterranean region and in Europe, we started to use the term crisis. And obviously this was the media case in the beginning, because media serve the news, the actuality very fast. Then it was the part of the political discourse, both at the EU level, but also at national levels in member states. And finally, it found its place among key academic topics, and this is the case of today's presentation and conference as well. So we have crisis. We have crisis concerning a very important field of migration, asylum, international protection, but also border management in case of the EU. Why the crisis? Maybe because of the numbers, because if we look at the international providers of different statistical data in the field of migration, we can see that in 2014 we had a first increase, a very big increase of the number of people moving to Europe. And talking about these international providers of the data in the field of migration, I'm thinking about international organizations or agendas of these organizations. It's United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, it's International Organization for Migration, it's Frontex, and it's European Asylum Support Office. So far, 2015 is considered to be the peak year of the crisis in terms of absolute numbers, and then 2016 is the year when we observed the decrease in the number of people moving to Europe. Why? As far as you know, it's mostly because of the agreement, even not agreement from the legal perspective, but the statement that was signed by two parties, the EU and Turkey. And because of its implementation, the number of Syrian nationals moving to Greece decreased. And then we have 2017, it's the end of the crisis. I don't know, we are still observing the data and the way the data are interpreted by different stakeholders. some visuals about the crisis. So here we have the data provided by Frontex. What were the main migratory corridors in the field of this crisis? So 3 of them: Eastern Mediterranean route, Western Balkan route, and Central Mediterranean route. It was the case of 2015, and this year we had more than 1.8 million detections of illegal border crossing between border crossing points along the EU external borders. But still we have to keep in mind 2 issues: that many cases of illegal entry to the EU were not detected and not recorded, and then also many migrants lost their life while trying to reach Europe. In 2016, the Frontex numbers are a bit different, even strongly different, because we had only over 500,000 of this kind of detections. So please look at the numbers: 1.8, almost 2 million, and this year half a million. And we had the same main migratory routes to Europe, with small changes between the 2nd and 3rd position. If we have increase in case of the migratory movements, we have also increase in terms of the people that need international protection in Europe, and it's about the people called these people are usually called asylum seekers or asylum applicants or people in need of international protection. So this is about the numbers concerning the asylum applications, mostly in the EU member states. And in 2015, as we can see, it was about 1.3 million applications that were submitted in the EU 2028. And the main destination countries were Germany, Hungary, Sweden, Austria, and Italy. Here we have the data also for 2016, and once again there is a decrease between 2016 and 2015. So 2015, this is the confirmation, was the peak year of the crisis, and 2016 there is a slight decrease. Why? Because of the EU-Turkey statement I've mentioned before. What are the main countries of origin of applicants in case of the EU? So it's Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Nigeria, and Iran. So, we have the crisis. I gave you some arguments based on the numbers. So what kind of crisis are we talking about? Usually, if we look at media coverage and political debate, we can find the expressions like migration crisis, migrant crisis, refugee, asylum crisis, humanitarian crisis. Now I have no time to go into details because I think that we have all of them, because we have in fact a multi-dimensional crisis, and everything depends on the perspective we apply to approach the issue. But also we have the solidarity crisis. Why? Because the EU member states have no idea how to implement in practice what is stipulated in the Treaty on the Functioning of the EU. And they have no idea how to solve together the problem, the challenge that arose in the EU and is really of a key importance for our common future. To make it as short as is possible, why we have where this solidarity principle is stipulated. So it's stipulated in the Article 80 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the EU, and it's about the let me give you a short citation from this article. The policies of the Union set out in this chapter and their implementation shall be governed by the principle of solidarity and fair sharing of responsibility, including its financial implications between the member states. So the solidarity is put in the treaty. However, it's not implemented. And the best example to verify why it's not implemented, it's about two mechanisms that were proposed in the European Agenda on Migration. This was the comprehensive, coherent document proposed and announced by the European Commission in May 2015, 15, where the EU and the EC proposed different solutions to the crisis in short, mid, and long-term perspective. And in case of the immediate action plan, there were two emergency schemes proposed: relocation and resettlement. And in case of these two schemes, the solidarity principle did not work. What we have in mind while saying relocation and resettlement? So the relocation in case of the EU is about transferring asylum seekers, so people in need of international protection, to the EU member states from two EU member states that were mostly affected by the crisis, so from Italy and Greece. And resettle mechanism, what is important? It's not an EU invention. Resettlement scheme is in fact the part of the agreement between the EU and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So this is also about EU involvement in international refugee law. So resettlement means to provide safe and legal transfer of an increasing number of people in need of international protection from third countries, so from the outside of the EU to the EU. And if we look at the numbers concerning people or relocated or resettled, we have some stars, and among the stars that do not implement this mechanism and in practice do not refer to the solidarity principle are, mentioned today by Professor Guralczyk, Visegrad countries. And among them we have two leaders, Hungary and Poland. I do not have to remind you the debate, the discussions that were held by the government officials from these countries concerning accept or not accept the people in need of international protection. So, solidarity does not work, even if it's put in the treaty. And then we ask very often ourselves why the EU cannot solve in an efficient way the crisis, the migrant and refugee crisis. Because the EU is an international body composed of 28 member states. And unfortunately, in this case, the migration and asylum issues are the part of the so-called shared competence. It means that the EU institutions have to take into consideration national approaches and national contribution from the member states. And I would say that this is one of the main reasons why the European Agenda on Migration cannot be successfully implemented and why we cannot solve in a right manner the migrant and refugee crisis. So just as the reference point for the further discussion, I hope. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask the audience about the questions to our experts and announce that we will have a very short break because I got the notice from organizers that we will need 5-minute break at least after our questions. Do we have any questions now? No questions. Okay, so maybe I will start first of all. Yes, Professor? Or comment? Okay, so Professor Stemniak will make a comment after short break. Anybody else? Okay, so maybe I will... Yes, of course. Of course, comments are very welcome.
Due to the fact that, as you observed, I was the only unprepared person not presenting the PowerPoint, but I still do believe in power of my arguments. So this is the reason of this approach. And due to the fact that I must leave after this session, I would add one additional remark concerning the last presentation, which actually was almost combined with my first intervention. Marta Pachocka mentioned, quite rightly so, that this migrant crisis is multidimensional, and this is true because to my mind, this is the question, as I describe, a structural crisis. We have the problem of some 3+ million displaced people in the refugee camps in Turkey, and we have new Sultan Erdogan in Turkey. And he is playing this card constantly. So we have the Turkish issue, whatever you mean by that. Second, Mr. Orban has just placed second line of barbed wires along his borderlines, and some of them with electricity. And when you go to Hungary, and when the member state of the European Union, and you will see on every corner and every street government-sponsored huge banners saying "Stop Brussels," meaning we don't allow the quota, we don't want them. So you start to think where you are. So we have Hungarian question. Third point, we used to talk, well, those are refugees, some of them migrants, but mainly from Syria. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a mistake. It's a wrong approach, because we have Africa approaching the European Union. And we need to debate that. Due to many reasons, climate change, inequality, different standard of life, and so on and so forth. But if we don't start to talk about this, we will resolve nothing. And the solidarity as a value, as it was expressed in the last intervention here, is already undermined within the European Union, among the member states, and in every particular member state. Finally, we are in Warsaw. We are in Poland. We have different kinds of migrant question which should be raised on the European scene, on the European scale. We are not discussing that, to my mind, not enough. We have more than 500,000 Ukrainians daily here in Poland. And this is okay. We can absorb them. But what will happen if instead of 500,000, by the way, Polish Prime Minister, when presented Polish case in the European Parliament debate on this particular issue, mentioned the number 1 million. So even the Polish Prime Minister is exaggerating the number. But what will be if instead of 500,000, we will have 1.5 million of them on the territory? And right now we have Schengen visas, so not only Poland, but the European Union. So we should debate this particular question of migrants, displaced people, refugees. All of them are different categories, but this is extremely complicated and most sensitive issue, which already undermined our axiology, our system of values. And yes, to finalize, when I'm presenting the European Union to my students, I have 3 definitions. As for now yet, one, that the European Union is a process. Second, that we are trying to create a very peculiar subject on international relations or international scene. And finally, that we still share the common system of values. But observing what I observe right now, I have many, many doubts. Do we share the same system of values? That's what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I heard that Professor will be leaving, so I will have the first question to Professor Guralczyk, because you mentioned at the beginning that beside the shared values that are mentioned in treaties like solidarity, discrimination, and so on, very important issue for the future of European Union will be the security issue. What is your opinion about creation of a European army? Is it possible scenario? Even if we talk about the 5 scenarios proposed in white paper of European Commission, can you make a general comment for inspiration for us and some thoughts maybe for the future?
Immediately, I am deeply convinced that we should change this very famous motto, which I already mentioned in my intervention, which was Clinton administration, economy stupid. Here and now, security stupid should be our slogan of the day, and for many reasons. Point number 1, the process of Brexit is already instigated and initiated because the process was formally inaugurated. This is important because Great Britain is one of the largest armies in the NATO and the European Union. So immediately after Brexit, we will have responsibility of France and Germany. By the way, this could be very optimistic, not only because of Macron, but first of all, that France is providing probably the most valuable armaments, army, and security right now, which could be a part of the game with the Germans. Germany is very strong economically. France, military and security system, maybe this axis of Paris and Berlin will be working, because it's not only back to the roots, because what was the origin of the European integration? Reconciliation between the French and the Germans. So we are moving back to the roots. But if we want to have the system effective, everyone should have some strong points. And in this respect, I see that the French have the leverage, which is the security system, which is good because Germany, like it or not, is too strong economically. And everyone in Europe, everyone has budget deficit, but Germany has budget surplus for continuous years. And we need to do something. And this is a real issue. So, Brexit, paradoxically, in answering your question, could be positive sign. But still, we don't know what will be the role of United Kingdom or disunited Kingdom, who know what will be in Scotland or Ireland. As a former diplomat and ambassador, I would like to have Scotch with me constantly, as you know. So this is maybe a bad joke, but it has some meaning. Finally, we can talk long on this subject. This is the time to come back seriously after this election line, which I mentioned in my presentation, after Germany and Italy. Are we ready to have former border guards, customs controls, and finally, maybe not only rapid forces, but maybe a common security system? I'm not saying the common army. So, yes, this is something which is emerging as one of the most important tasks, and homeworks, if I may say so, for our leaders. We cannot continue as we are. You mentioned these 5 scenarios from the White Book presented on March the 1st by Mr. Juncker. The first one is not for continuation. Probably it will be between scenario number 3 and 4. But be careful, here there's a difference, and this will be my final point. Germany is in favor of old German. It's still from Chancellor Brandt, and it is strongly supported initiative of multi-speed integration. Multi-speed integration is strongly supported by Chancellor Merkel. And this is okay, that's what we, like it or not, we have it. Concerning Schengen, Euro, many other things, even migrants. However, the French idea, which is also in these 5 scenarios, concentric circles, is a different one. Because if you have concentric circles, automatically you have a hard core. And the hard core is the question who? Eurozone? Maybe initial 6? Or maybe that's what I describe as a gang of 4. A week after Juncker's presentation, François Hollande invited Chancellor Merkel, plus Prime Minister of Italy and Spain, to Versailles, and they debated. And all this is on the agenda now. And it will come after the elections to the European dispute, definitely. And from this perspective, we here in Poland, we here in Visegrad countries, we in East Central Europe, we are in 2nd, 3rd circle automatically. Do we like it? Do we want it? We need to discuss this issue, because this is also our security issue, not only NATO, which hopefully will have unanimous vote today in Brussels when they are sharing this outdated NATO is meeting today with Donald Trump. Maybe this will be finalization of common agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the audience? I will ask one more time. Maybe you have some comments. No, I have one final, I will not leave this, because I have asked one panelist, and I would like to give an opportunity to answer also the other panelists, because I will give the general question, maybe somebody who feels like answering will have, because we have the panel, Political and Policy Challenges in Europe, Shared Values with a question mark. I'm thinking about that. In all the contexts that we have touched today in different subjects, we are considering the lack of effectiveness in implementation of different policies in European Union. Can you name some key elements which, from your point of view, are crucial to raise the effectiveness in policy implementation? As I see this one of the crucial determinant for the future of European Union if we want to talk about more coherent and more consistent European Union. This is an open question for all panelists. Maybe Professor Zwała.
It's very general. It works. Yes. It's very general question. It would be good to take into account some specific policies and to analyze the policy process or policy-making process. Well, as I said before, European policy-making is very complicated, because there are many levels of discussion, negotiations, deliberation, and so on, and it takes a lot of time until we can make some solutions, or at least some piece of legislation. Well, generally, this is a general opinion that implementation, the formulation, policy formulation, and then policy implementation it takes so much time. It's not effective. But my opinion is that it's effective, quite effective in reality we live in. It's not possible to, sometimes very often, it's not possible to make it quicker because policy matters are very complicated. And many people formulate critical approach because on the basis what they can see, for example, in the media, on TV screens, that there are some problems left unresolved, and like migrant crisis. But well, it would be possible to create some legal regulations how to deal with that. But we are still in the EU, which is composed from many countries, and every country has its own national interest, and it's not easy. Sometimes it's easy to convince them to follow the European line. This is what we can see right now. For example, in Poland, there is very clear policy on migrants, but for example, Poland tends to ignore it because of the internal political agenda. This is what we should take into account when we talk about ineffectiveness in implementation, in formulation, and policy implementation. It's very complicated, and I think it's good that we are able to keep things together in the leading policy areas.
If I may, I don't want to dominate this debate, but talking about the effectiveness. I don't know if you still remember Robert Kagan and his very famous essay, probably from 2001, of Paradise and Power. When he started this essay, he claimed famously that the Americans are from Mars and the Europeans are from Venus, that the Americans believe in power and the Europeans are, so Americans are hard power and the Europeans debates, discussions, the dialogue, soft power, okay? The real problem for us, how to gather together some more power for Europe and European Union. And the major problem from the question you're asking, effectiveness, that we are not decided, and we are more and more deeply divided, what to do. Intergovernmental solution or supranational solution. If we don't find a common vision in this or this dimension, we will be less and less soft power, not talking about the hard power. And this is the answer.
Okay. Professor Gabrichice, maybe you would like to, no comment? Okay, so I'm getting now the notes from our organizers that we shall finish, and I would like to invite you for a short 5-minute break. Thank you very much for your presentation, your speeches, and your comments. It was a very great pleasure for me to meet you and share the reflection. Thank you very much.
So we have only a 3-4 minute technical break to change our composition of the second session. If you want